Tino here, chairman and founder of the USA Memory Championship, and doing my Live with Tony from Monday evening. And it's always a pleasure to start on Mondays because of the opportunity I've had a bunch of reading over the weekend and try to distill some of the articles and some of the work that comes out of research today and the difference that it makes to our lives. And that goes without saying that this weekend's reading continues to talk about the elements of what we would define as brain power. What are the things that we can do that really would help us enhance our own cognitive functions and mental abilities that we really never thought of in the past? I know before I started doing the research that I've done now for just about 30 years, which seems like a heck of a long time, but boy, the amount of information I've absorbed in those 30 years just continues to tell us that our brains are not fixed, that we do not have to be doomed to have a brain with the capacity at birth that doesn't grow and doesn't get enhanced as exercise in our muscles, as we do with our arms and as we do with our chest and our abs and everything, abs and pecs and thighs. There are exercises that we can do with our brain as well. So I spent time today with Michael Dattino, who has put together the Maximum Memory Mastery online course, and we were doing demographics survey results on people that have been interested in the Maximum Memory Mastery, and the outgrowth of that has come to what we call the 6 elements of brain health, which then created a third online course that he's working on called Becoming a Super Learner. And so for the Maximum Memory Mastery, these are people that want to really work on the elements of how to improve their memory. And that can be from names and faces to list of things that you need to remember for procedures or checklist of things. It could be as much as digits and numbers of data that you've got to remember in terms of numerical values. It can be as far as how do you assimilate information and coordinate it for comprehension so you can juice up your creative process. And so there's a number of elements in there. And then in the back end of that course is a thing called brain-to-brain communication, which in itself has an extraordinarily powerful add-on as what we call bonus for people to really learn how do we take all of these things and use them to enhance our communications to ensure that intention of communication is followed by action. So we've had a lot of good feedback on all of the various elements of what this is and what we can do to make things improved. And it's been great to get feedback from people that are looking at it and are giving us some great suggestions and how to make it more useful and beneficial to people that are looking to improve their mental capacities and brain health and have the belief that you can actually do this. Which then brings us to the elements of brain health. And there's a demographic of people that probably wait until they're late 30s, early 40s, and all of a sudden they start thinking about parents or relatives that have been hit with dementia of some sort. Alzheimer's is the major buzzword today. And they want to know what can they do? Is there anything that they can do to take a little bit of control over their own lives that make a difference in terms of their abilities or capacities of doing things that they can control in their life that may help minimize or help reduce any of the risks that they may have in terms of cognitive impairment. And the science on this is just so rapidly being updated and changing and giving us a level of hope, as obviously billions of dollars are being poured into Alzheimer's research, and there's all kinds of studies on dementia and what's going on in terms of our mental capacities. And there is a consistency of what at least early research is revealing. And I say early, in the history of the human race in the thousands of years, early can be 20 years or 10 years. And so in the early research on this, which has been going on now for a good 20 plus years, there is some consistency coming out that mental challenges continue to be one of the hot button items of how do you exercise your brain. And mental challenges can be, as we learn, dancing can be one. So dancing is really great, learning how to ballroom dance, because it engages your senses, it engages your motor skills, it engages your thinking. So you're observing, you're touching. It's an integration of a whole lot of things in the human system that impact cognitive function. There's a lot of stuff, mental challenges. So I say, God, learning how to improve your memory, learning how to improve names and faces, learning how to absorb reading material so that you can comprehend it and chunk it and store it a little bit more efficiently. All of these things are showing to be beneficial to exercising your brain. So I ask people, what do you do to exercise your brain? And many of them look at me like this is a really weird question to ask. What do you mean exercise your brain? I lift weights, and yes, aerobic and anaerobic and flexibility are all things beneficial to our body, which is then beneficial to our brain. But what specifically do you do to target how to build your dendritic spines and your neuron firings and the things that are inside your head that specifically are focused on how to extend the spines of the dendrites, and how do you make better connections and make them stronger. So what is a mental challenge that you might do that does that? And so a lot of people go, well, I do Sudoku. Well, Sudoku is not going to be one of those. As there's been conflicting science on that as to whether those types of things really, it helps you get better at Sudoku, but does it really help you to do your brain? And what I read this weekend is the most important thing you can do to create new patterns is something different that you've never done before. So don't go back to something that you've always loved doing and just try to do it better, which is not a bad thing to do in becoming an expert at something, but do something you've never thought of that's so foreign and different, because it generates totally new patterns of thought. It generates new patterns of thinking and memories. So master a skill or master something you've never ever thought of doing before, and focus on learning what that skill is and embedding that into your brain, which creates all new patterns of neurons and the firings and the patterns in your brain. So mental challenges. So what are you doing in your life that generates new thinking and new patterns of thought, not just building on that which is your expertise already, but taking a new hobby or learning how to sing or learning how to write music or taking some skill that you've never thought, maybe carpentry it might be it, or building something you've never thought to build, and following instructions and then focusing on the building and the crafting of it. So what are some of the things that you can do in your life that really put your brain to the task of thinking and having to focus, and then practicing that focus and seeing where it takes you? And that's in our elements of brain health. And then, of course, there's how do you become a super learner? So how do we take all of this knowledge that we're accumulating, and how do you begin to absorb it in a way where your brain utilizes this knowledge of memory and retention and comprehension and uses it in a way where you, as you're learning new things, or you're reading policies, or you're reading something for a school or a promotion that you need in a profession, in your job, how do you make these skills practical for everyday use? Excuse me. How do you make them to where it's not just, hey, I'm learning and to challenge my brain, but I'm using these skills to improve my profession or improve my academic standings? And again, this is our ability to become super learners. And what's the process that we follow to do that? And what are the steps that we would take in sequence to be able to do that in a way where we just kind of blow ourselves away? We just kind of look at, like I think of today, what I've learned about the human mind over the last 30 years. And God, I was a financial graduate, a finance expert, and the next thing I'm doing is studying the human mind. And when I think of the work I've done over the last 30 years and the learnings and the lessons I've had and the differences it's made in people's lives, I just could never, ever have imagined that 30 years ago. So I want you to think about, so what is something that you can do to enhance your learning. So it is fun that as you do go through mental challenges, your learning capacities are enhanced. And in fact, as you get older, and this is what I always love, when people make these discriminating remarks about getting older and your brain and your memory, I always want to know, so when have you ever taught people how their memories work? When have you taught them how to enhance their learning capacities at any age? And I always say there's hope for all of us. I'm consistently, I've said to you, I'm reading all the time. I'm constantly taking new information and then integrating it into what I have. But I also look to learn new things from time to time and dabble in trying to fix something in the house, which I'm not the most skilled at, but trying to dabble in areas that I have never dealt with before, but to just give it a go. And sometimes I get frustrated and I tend to want to quit. Other times I say, I'm going to figure this out because this is what I teach people on my Live with Tony. So I'm going to stay with this and I'm going to figure it out. So find that balance, that pendulum swing that allows you to go back and forth and do something for your own mental health, physical health, and connect those, because a healthy body is a healthy mind and a healthy mind is a healthy body, and they all come together. We're one system. We're one systemic process as a human that has a lot of complexity to it, but science and research is beginning to unravel those complexities and make a big difference to us. And there's nothing more relevant in terms of that than what we're dealing with COVID. And in the world of COVID today, we've created a lot of social isolation, which you see people at stadiums during Saturday, Sunday football games, thousands of people just coming out of their caves, so to speak, coming out and not wear masks. Now, I'm not crazy about some of this stuff. I'm still being very conservative with it. But COVID has taken away a lot of our social interaction. And I'm reading more and more about the increase in depression, anxiety, social isolation, and we know all of those things are not good for us. So we've traded off one element of our health, which we see clearly as the physical, but we've traded off the mental health, which we really don't know that much about. And so we make that trade-off saying, well, physically I got to stay well, but what we don't realize is mentally we may be discounting our own mental capacities at the same time, and therefore it may be sometimes it's down the road when all of a sudden we hit the wall and we say, whoa, you know what, I just don't have the energy and the life and the spirit that I've had once before. And I see that as people going right now football games. I saw it in the World Series in baseball. I'm sure it's going on what's going up this week in basketball. We're going back to college basketball. I'm sure those arenas are going to be an interesting lab experience on inside arenas and what that's going to do as opposed to outside the football stadiums and baseball stadiums. So that's what I wanted to at least cover based on this weekend's reading. I'm back on again on Wednesday in the 5 o'clock hour. And until then, have a good week. Let's get it all off to the start and think about what are you doing this week to create some new mental challenges for yourself, and what are you doing this week to, and not go crazy.